Hey everyone, Dr. Zio here again, and today we're going to try a little bit of a new setup here. We want to try something different before Season 2 of Dino Fury begins. But before we start the second season, as you might have known if you've been watching my reviews this last year, you know that I always ended the episode or ended the review with any questions we've had throughout the season or questions we got from that episode. And so now it's time to take a look back through those questions and figure out, what questions we have remaining after the first season's been over, and what questions we actually had answered throughout the season. So I'm going to do this in kind of a split format. We're going to talk about the questions we had answered first, and then we'll close out the video with all the questions that we still have going into the second season, which premieres in 1 week from today, so on March 3rd, 2022. Let's go ahead and start off with episode 1, Destination Dinohenge, our premiere for the season. Basically, our first question that we actually did have answered was, what happened with the other Rangers? Zato is the only Ranger who survived the Great Sporks battle 65 million years ago, and Zato actually tells us when he demorphs and starts talking about his history that the other Rangers were lost. So in typical Power Rangers fashion, they try and shy away from saying dead or death or anything of that nature. They typically go with destroyed, but for whatever reason, they did not go with that this time around. So we were kind of left wondering, well, what exactly does he mean by lost exactly? So in episode 4, New Recruits, near the end of the episode when Javi and Izzy joined the team, he also says that they didn't know that the green and black dino keys survived, which insinuates that when he said lost, it insinuates that they died somehow. This is further backed up by episode 15, Storm Surge, or not episode 15, episode 16, Ancient History. This is the episode after Ion's debut, where Zato asks Ion, so how did you survive the Great Sporks battle? I thought you were lost with our other teammates. And then Ion also echoes this sentiment later on in episode 20, Waking Nightmare? After Zato gets transported over to Nibiru, Ion's explaining to the others that, I don't know who those people were on Nibiru. I thought our teammates didn't survive the Great Sporks battle. So that is thankfully a question that we have answered. So going on to episode 2, Sporks Unleashed, here our question of the day, or one of the questions we had was, well, where are the other dino keys? At the beginning of the episode when everyone's training, the other Rangers, Ollie and Amelia, bring up the fact that there are 6 dino statues at Dinohenge, but only 3 Rangers so far. It means that we're missing 3 Rangers and 3 dino keys to go with them. And Zato tells them, the other keys were lost. Again, at the time, we didn't know what exactly lost meant or whether or not, Solon and Zato had spent any time searching for the other dino keys. So come to find out in episode 4, once Javi and Izzy joined the team, we find out that they were actually encased in the Nephrite Orb. So breaking open the Nephrite Orb unveiled the green and black dino keys. And then in episode 15, Storm Surge, we find out that, hey, Ion's here with his gold dino key, and he was actually at the bottom of the harbor because he ejected out of the Zord during the Great Sporks battle, and that's where his pod landed. And then obviously the Green Morphin Master woke him up, later on, earlier in this season, so that he would be up and ready to go to fight the great threat of Lord Zed. This episode also brought up a second question in what exactly is Void Knight's plan? He's a very mysterious, shady character. Because in this episode we see him introduce Mucus to Area 62, his base of operations for this. Oh, my bad. Our villain's base of operations for this season. And he's feeding the sporks into this jukebox machine that's going to play into his master plan. So long as it gets enough energy to actually power. So it's not until episode 8, Unexpected Guest, that we find out what exactly is in that. Once Boom Tower is destroyed and Mucus goes back to Void Knight to report that destruction, Boom Tower gives Mucus gives Void Knight, big boom. Was it Boom Towers? No, it was the Monster of the Week's Wolfgang's power up sporks, and then he feeds that into the machine, but it's not enough power. So in a fit of rage, he goes back into that mysterious room that's also what is it? That's also electrified the door, so no one can get into it. So he's very cagey about this. But we find out in that scene that he's talking to a mysterious lady in in some sort of pod. And the credits for that episode let us know that that is Santora, his love, so he says. She hasn't actually woken up yet, so we can only take what he says at face value. Whether or not she shares those same sentiments, we don't know yet. I mean, this is Power Rangers. I assume that, those two are on the same page, but who knows? They might pull an okie doke on us. And then that lets us segue into episode 6, Superstition Strikes. In this episode, Void Knight keeps talking about the mysterious room and brings up the question, what is in that room? Which obviously, again, episode 8 shows that it is Santora, his lover, or the person who's really striving to get to revive back with that machine, maybe a stasis machine. We don't know exactly what that machine is as of yet. Going on to episode 8, Unexpected Guest, also brings up a good question. Well, what exactly was the Ninja Nexus Prism searching for? We see the Ninja Nexus Prism scan and then dive into the harbor, but we don't actually get any sort of resolution on this front until episode 15, Storm Surge. In episode 15, we kind of go back to that because there's a weird energy signature above of the harbor where the Ninja Nexus Prism had dove into. Dr. Akana helps the Rangers retrieve what was in the harbor. Turns out it's the Gold Ranger's stasis pod from when he was ejecting from the Megazord back 65 million years ago. We find out that the Ninja Nexus Prism was indeed searching for the Gold Ranger. And once they found it, then the Green Morphin Master took over, came in, and woke him up so that he could be ready to fight Lord Zed with the other Rangers. So moving on to episode 14, Old Foes. In this episode, the first question we have is, well, what's Void Knight's plan for Regal? This episode, we see Lord Zed get revived by the magician called, or I guess he's a sorcerer called Regal. He has powers that can revive people. He also has these really handy sleepy cuffs where he puts them on you, and then you just kind of fall into like a dazed state. And he also has the compliance collar, which he uses to control Lord Zed. But after Lord Zed's compliance collar gets knocked off, rather than get defeated by Lord Zed, Regal teleports back to Void Knight's base, and then Void Knight throws the sleepy cuffs on Regal, and then throws him into a cell, for later purposes. We find out that in episode 21, Void Trap, the master plan here, I guess, wasn't necessarily a master plan, it just kind of fell into place like this, because the Rangers want to use Dr. Akana as bait. That sounds really bad out of context, doesn't it? But yeah, the Rangers want to use Dr. Akana as bait so that they could trick Void Knight into using the power item to power Dr. Akana's thing for siphoning Morphin Grid energy off of the Dino Hinge statues. And Void Knight, when he meets up with Dr. Akana, ends up using Regal to put sleepy cuffs onto the Rangers. Well, he uses Regal to teleport Dr. Akana, Mucus, and Scyther to a Dark Dimension, and then he throws Regal into a Dark Dimension as well. And then he uses the sleepy cuffs to put 4 out of the 5 present Rangers into a trance so that he can use them for his plan later on in the episode. At the time, I also wondered if Regal could bring back Zeto's old teammates as Zed's new team of Dark Rangers. That'd be a nice little throwback to the Mighty Morphin days and would have a additional purpose for Regal. But I mean, at this point, we saw in that same episode that Regal gets destroyed by what's his name? Well, by Zeto in episode 21. So no dice there. That's not going to happen unless something happened off screen that we haven't seen yet. But I'm not really counting on that. And in episode 15, Storm Surge, our question of the week was, who is this mysterious Gold Ranger and what exactly is his background? Zeto seemed pretty shook when the Gold Ranger popped up, and of course, we get our answers and a lot more than I bargained for in the follow-up episode, episode 16, Ancient History. This episode gives us so much information and backstory on both Zato and our Gold Ranger Ion, and it was fantastic. Probably one of my favorite episodes of the season, if not one of my favorite episodes of the last few years, or at least the beginning part of it. But basically, to answer the question, the Gold Ranger's name is Ion. He's one of the Rafcon Knights who was Zato's best friend and fellow Gold Ranger on the team. So he was there when Rafcon got overtaken by Sporks, and he was there following them to Earth 65 million years ago. He was also there for the final battle between the Sporks, and he ejected out of the Ultrazord with Zato. When the Ultrazord's final attack kind of went haywire and caused the Zord to explode. But more than that, he was the skeptical person when it came to releasing the Sporks as a way to defend Rafcon against whatever they were fighting against, which we'll get to here later on in this video. But yeah, he was the one who wanted Zato to think this over and said, hey man, this plan does not seem to sound. The Sporks, they're not stable enough to release against these people. We shouldn't be doing this. But of course, Zato doesn't listen to him. He gives them the all okay to release the Sporks, and Zato tries to stop them from doing so, or not Zato, Ion tries to stop him from doing so, which Zato and him get into a tuffle before the Rafconians release the Sporks, and then all hell breaks loose from there. And going into our final question that we've had answered so far is in episode 19, the Makeover. In that episode, we see that we have what is it, Pop Pop, Dr. Akana, and Beatrice all help the Rangers find was it, I want to say Blackbeard's chest that's below Dino Henge, and it has 2 Dino keys in it, or Dino Battle Key, or no, was it Dino Zord keys or Dino Battle keys, one of the two within it. And so we find out in the next episode, in episode 20, Waking Nightmare, that in that chest were the Light and Shadow Dino keys. So the Light Dino key is used to lift curses, whereas the Shadow Dino key can be used to power up and create black holes. So yeah, I mean, we're gonna go into that a little bit more here later on in the video, but basically that is all the questions that we had during those first 22 episodes that we actually had answered. So let's go ahead and dive into the questions we still have answered going into season 2. So first things first, circling back to episode 1, Dino Henge, our question of the week was, well, our unanswered question of the week was, what's Void Knight's connection with the Rangers? I mean, it's pretty obvious that Void Knight in some way, shape, or form is connected to the Rangers. First off, when Solon was tossing the Henchman Dino Key over to the Rangers, to Ollie and Amelia to use on their weapons, Void Knight caught it and then immediately used it on his own sword. So for some reason, Void Knight's sword is compatible with the Dino Keys. So he's using the same technology that the Rangers are for their weapons. And it's like, well, why is that? He has to have some sort of connection to the Rangers, because the Rangers got that technology from the Morphin Masters themselves when they became Power Rangers. Could Void Knight be connected to the Morphin Grid himself in some way, shape, or form, or even connected to the Morphin Masters? Who's to say? Zato, even later on that episode, Zato also asked, where did you get that armor? And Void Knight declines answering. He says, it's not important now. I'm like, okay, so they're trying to draw some sort of, they're trying to draw our attention to the fact that Void Knight has this armor. So it's like, well, why do you have this armor? Void Knight, let's go ahead and talk about that. But, hopefully we'll find out, within these first 11 episodes here next week. And then episode 2, Sporks Unleashed, well, we get introduced to Area 62, which is our villain's base of operation, and it seems to be that Void Knight's been chilling there for a while now. And of course the question is, what is Area 62, or why is it there in the first place? And we kind of get bits and pieces of information about Area 62 as the season goes on. In this same episode, Void Knight tells us that humans abandoned it so many years ago, but he doesn't really go into any further detail. And then even in episode 5, Winning Attitude, the episode where they're searching for Izzy Izzy Zord, Void Knight also has a map of I guess Pine Ridge, within Area 62, and he makes a comment that they were searching for something in the vicinity of where Izzy Zord is, and they found some sort of metal object. But again, he doesn't go into any further detail beyond that. And then later on in episode 11's McScary Manor, when Pop-Up's having a conversation there with Amelia, who's morphed as the Pink Ranger, he mentions that he used to work at Area 62 and that they did some scary things there. But again, he does not go into further detail. We get the season's drip feeding information about Area 62 to us, but so far we don't have an answer to exactly what happened at Area 62, why Void Knight's there, and all this other any other mystery surrounding that area. And then in episode 3, Lost Signal, the episode actually starts with Amelia and Zeta going down from the top of Dino Henge into the base because Solon says that they've received a message from deep space in the same galactic quadrant as Rafcon. Unfortunately, due to the battle in the first episode, you can actually see it in the background. The device that they're using to decode the message gets damaged in that first episode, so they can't really listen to the message. Well, later on in the episode, they're able to use Zeto's pendant to repair the damage and actually finally listen to the episode. But unfortunately, it's in a language that Solon cannot understand. She understands a lot of languages, but somehow French is difficult to her, which, again, I know I mentioned at the time of my review, but that line was funny. That line was very funny. But yeah, this message wasn't in French, and we don't know what language it was. We don't actually go back to this message anywhere in the season. So that's a pretty thick thread to just kind of dangle at us with no real sort of explanation or extrapolation later on this season. So hopefully we get an answer, next season, and they don't just forget about that, but we'll have to see about that. And then in episode 6, Superstition Strikes, we see that Void Knight has the ability to repair our Morpher. It's like, why are you able to do that, Void Knight? I mean, obviously, the big thing is that Void Knight could just be a good technical genius, right? I mean, to some point he helped build Slither and Boom Tower, so that might just be his thing, right? He's been presumably maintaining Santora's stasis chamber for God knows how many years. But I mean, there could be more to it. We already know that he has some sort, or well, we're assuming that he has some sort of connection to the Ranger's powers. So if he does, then it would make sense that on some level he understands how the morphers work as well, which is why he was able to repair Amelia's broken morpher. But I mean, I might be just reaching here. I guess we'll find out if any of this makes any sense or if any of this gets proven next season. And then in episode 8, Unexpected Guest, we have a few questions actually that haven't been answered yet. First things first is, who is Santora and what's her connection to Void Knight? Of course, we find out that Void Knight tells us that that's his love. But again, like I mentioned before, we only have Void Knight's side of the story. There very well could be another side of the story on Santora's end of it. I'm not expecting that, but, who knows? And, is Santora good or evil? They could pull the rug out from under us and reveal that she's actually a good person and that she doesn't agree with Void Knight's, with the lengths that Void Knight has gone to, revive her once she eventually does get revived. Or, she could be evil, and her and Void Knight, once she gets revived, could go up against the Rangers to conquer Earth or do whatever they want to from there. But again, we have to see. They don't really go into any sort of detail on Santora's allegiances at any point in this season. But the last question I had for this particular episode is, we see that the Morphin Masters, they made the Dark Energems, they made the Dino Gems, and they obviously made. They sent the Ninja Nexus Prism to Earth for Ninja Steel and also for this season. But the question here, and I don't expect to have this answered at all, is why did they create the Dark Energem? Like, that seemed like such a weird thing to do. Like, I didn't understand that. Again, it's a small question. I don't expect to hear it answered. I'm honestly not too sure if they answered it in Dino Charge. I don't know if it was like a yin-yang situation where the creation of the 10 Energems were so good that there had to be some evil to balance that out. But yeah, who knows if they answer that in the next season. And then in episode 9, Cut Off, this is the episode where the Rangers are going out into the woods to have their little camping expedition. And in this episode, Void Knight mentions that he's got a plan for the Rangers, but we don't ever actually get any details on what that plan was. I mean, it might have been making Scyther later on as his second general to kind of replace Boomtower. Scyther has definitely done work and proven his worth on the team and gotten results, but we don't actually get a de facto answer on what this man's plan was. And then for episode 11, McScary Manor, our two big questions are, one, what did Pop do in Area 62? He said that he saw some pretty scary things at that facility, but he doesn't actually go into detail. And then secondly, what happened to Amelia's parents? He said that they disappeared under, mysterious circumstances? Yeah, mysterious circumstances, but he doesn't go into any additional detail. Again, my man, I need further details, my guy. This is a plot that I'm very much looking forward to, and I'm glad that Pop's going to play a bigger role in this overall plot eventually, but I assume so. With Area 62 seeming to be like a big element for this season, it makes sense that Pop's going to be the one to come in and reveal more details sometime in season 2, hopefully sooner rather than later. And so in episode 14, Old Foes, we have the revival of Lord Zed himself. And unfortunately, he ends up leaving at the end of the episode. He teleports away because the Rangers are basically overpowering him because he doesn't have his staff, so he's not up to full power, or else he would have made Scorched Earth with them. But we don't know exactly where he goes. I mean, this kind of segues into episode 16, Ancient History, where Ion pops up and he tells us that the Green Morphin Master revived him because they're going to need help fighting Lord Zed. But Izzy counters with, they don't know where Lord Zed is. He's been off planet for ages now. Doesn't specify whether that's weeks or months, but just rather ages. So it's like, well, where exactly did he go? Could he be hanging out at the moon base, that he had back in the Mighty Morphin days? And last we saw was in the Turbo movie. Could he be up there, biding his time as he comes up with a new plan to take care of the Rangers, or trying to get hold of his staff again, or maybe even creating a new staff? We don't know. We just do not know. And then speaking of episode 16, let's talk about the Rafconians. The Rafconians created the Sporks, a very powerful threat that ended up backfiring in their faces. But why? I mean, we know that they did it to fight off some sort of powerful threat, but we don't know what exactly that threat was. What was so threatening that y'all had to create the Sporks beast? Like, that's perplexing, I guess I wanted to say. I mean, yeah, it's perplexing and it's kind of scary. It could have been Lord Zed. At the time, I posed that question, but at the same time, Lord Zed didn't know who, Ion didn't know who Lord Zed was in ancient history, so I don't think it's Lord Zed per se. Maybe it's somebody else, but whoever it is, we just don't know at this point. And then for episode 18, Crossed Wires, this is more of a rhetorical question, but where was Scyther in this episode? We see Mucus, we see the Rock triplets, and we see Void Knight back at the base, but we don't actually see Scyther at all. I don't really expect them to answer this at all, but just his absence in this episode was definitely felt. It's definitely an oddity for a villain who's done a lot since his debut. He's been very, very helpful, and who's supposed to be Mucus's best friend. And so we move on to episode 20, Waking Nightmare. And the question there was, what exactly are they going to use the Light Dino Key for? Zato and I believe Ion 2 tell us that the Light Dino Key can be used for lifting curses, but so far no one's been cursed. Is that going to play a big role in season 2? Are we going to see somebody get cursed and we need to lift that curse with the Light Dino Key, or is it going to be like a smaller, episode or gag of the week where some ranger gets cursed for the episode and they end up using that key to lift the curse? Again, we don't know. We just don't know. And then we move on to episode 21, Void Trap, our season finale. So first question is, what exactly happened to Void Knight? We see that Void Knight, jumps onto Santora's, stasis pod when it's about to blow up, and then it blows up. His sword goes flying into the ground. Zato grabs it and throws it off into the distance, and then the episode ends with Void Knight, with a back at Santora's section of Area 62, we see that there are cracks on her stasis pod. And then we pan to the bottom right where we have Void Knight's helmet, and that's all cracked as well. So, did he somehow teleport back to Area 62 with Santora? Is he somewhere out there? Is he somewhere out there in the city, just kind of meandering along, or just kind of wandering about? We don't know yet. Episode 22, was it Secret Santa? I believe it is. Yeah, Secret Santa. Mucus and Scyther return somehow, and they tell us that they mentioned that the Void Knight's been destroyed, but we don't know exactly why they said that. The assumption is that they got back to Area 62 somehow, and they saw that Void Knight wasn't there, or that maybe they got into his room and saw that his helmet was cracked, but he was actually nowhere to be found. But we don't actually have an explanation about why they say that he's destroyed. Because remember, at this point in time, during that episode 21 battle, they're not in the picture. They are still in the dark dimension. So we don't know how they got out. We don't know what exactly leads them to the conclusion that Void Knight's been destroyed. We don't know if they saw a body or not. But going on, our next question is, what is up with the Green Morphin Master, and where are the other Morphin Masters? What is her importance? Now, from episode 1, we see the 6 Morphin Masters. And then in episode 8, we see the 6 we see, what is that? I think 2 Morphin Masters, 2 or 4 Morphin Masters, creating the Energems, the Dino Gems, and then sending off the Ninja Nexus Prism to be a Ninja Steel. But after that, those scenes took place in the past. At least 65 million years ago, for episode 1, and then a little bit afterwards for episode 8, or the flashback in episode 8. But beyond that, we don't actually see any of the other Morphin Masters aside from Green. Green pops up in episode 16, Ancient History, to revive Ion. So we know that she's still out there in present day. And then she pops up again at the end of episode 21 to give the Rangers back their powers, because they still have important duties to accomplish. But then afterwards, she just leaves. She doesn't give us any sort of explanation about where the other Morphin Masters are, and this seems to be very deliberate. They're deliberately not showing the other Morphin Masters for some sort of reason. Have they been captured by Lord Zed? Have they been destroyed? Where are they? And why is it that we're only seeing the Green Morphin Master? Why are they putting so much importance on her? And the final question for this episode was, how are Mucus and Scyther going to escape the dark dimension? We're also going to roll this into our question of the week for episode 22, Secret Santa, which was, how did they escape the dark dimension? Because episode 22 shows that they escaped the dark dimension somehow, but neither 21 or 22 tells us how one would escape the dark dimension without having sort of access to teleportation technology. But that is pretty much it. Those are all of our questions that we haven't had answered going into season 2. As you can see, there are still quite a bit of things we have to learn going into season 2, in addition to new questions that the season is going to bring up in its 22 episode run. So I'm very excited to see what happens. I'm very excited to see where we close out the season once everything is all said and done with. But remember that we have these 22 episodes, or we have the first 11 episodes of season 2 dropping next Thursday on Netflix at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. First 11 episodes we're going to have, so I am so excited. And just in case you're wondering, even though we are having that batch drop, I will be doing my normal format of 1 episode per review, so expect to have a nice flow of reviews within those coming weeks. Otherwise, again, thank you again for watching. I know it's been a long one, but this has been a video I've been wanting to make for a while now, and just finally got around to making it. But otherwise, if you all have anything you want to tell me, or any tips you want to have, or regarding the video format, do you like this video format? Do you not? Let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, please do subscribe, like, and comment. It does actually help me for the long run. But otherwise, as always, mask up, stay safe. Peace be to my people in the Ukraine. At the time of this recording, Russia has just launched an attack on the Ukraine. For those people being affected by that, let me know that my thoughts and prayers are with you guys. With you people. I wish that there were other ways I could help, but yeah, I do hope you. I do send my best wishes with all of you. But yeah, otherwise, I hope everyone else has a good week and stay safe. And I will see y'all in the next one. Thank you again, and peace.